We are Mike and Jeannie, and we restore old houses. In 2021, we moved to South Carolina and bought a 120-year-old Victorian house. Follow along as we put the polish back on this Victorian masterpiece.
Welcome back to 1834 Restoration House.
It is a beautiful day here in South Carolina, and we're back in the wood shop one more time. This will be the last time, I promise, because we need to finish up this blanket chest. And the reason we need to do that is, well, because she wants to use it, but also because we need the wood shop back for commercial purposes for our new stereo amplifier business. This will eventually become an amplifier cover. But today, we're going to go ahead and finish up this chest.
These are the offcuts from the base of the blanket chest, and they would have been just thrown out, but Mike put them up here and asked if I liked it, and I love it. It was a brilliant idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it does add a nice decorative element to it, so we went ahead and glued these on. Now, today is something that we've been dreading for a long time because it's permanent.
A little scary.
A little scary because you can't go back on it, and that is the finishing of the wood.
Yes.
So this is brand new wood here. It's very raw, very real. And everything in this house is very old. And so in order to make this look very old, we had to try a couple of different techniques until we finally found something we liked.
And we're hoping it works.
I tried making a couple of different pigment stains. Well, this one here is pretty much black, and it makes the wood look like it's not only aged, but looks like it's been sitting outside and half rotted. So we didn't like that one. And we tried a couple of different reds and yellows, and blacks, and that didn't work either. And then, well, this is just basic raw wood right there. And then we tried this combination of red, yellow, and green pigments, and we came up with a wood tone that's very similar to the rest of the wood in this house. We did a lot of experimentation with different types of pigments, oils, and various things. We did a ton of research. We're trying to find that particular look. And we can't go back once we put it on there. So of course, we tested on just scraps of material that we have laying around. And we found that particular look that we're looking for, and we're going to replicate that right now. So the base here is denatured alcohol. Over on the other side of the ocean, it's called methylated spirits. It's the same stuff. All it is distilled grain alcohol with a couple extra things thrown in there so you don't drink it. Now, what I'm going to do is take this jar, and I'm going to add some pigments to it. So I have these pigments here we picked up from Earth Pigments. So we'll start with red. And I'm going to take 1 teaspoon. I'm going to wipe this off between uses so that I don't cross-contaminate the colors. Now I need 2 yellows. I'll tell you what they are in a minute. I'm just trying to screed them off so that they have the same amount consistently. So 2 of those. If you try this, you can always experiment, change the ratios however you want to. There's nothing hard and cast in stone here. And then 2 greens. It's virtually impossible to do this without making a mess. And it's harmless. These are basically just earth minerals, so they won't harm your dinnerware at all. Okay, we have this nice colorful blend of earth pigments. Take a look. Most of the stains you buy today are oil-based stains, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to make an alcohol-based stain. And we do that for a couple of reasons. It doesn't really soak into the wood, and it evaporates, leaving behind no residue. So what I'm going to do is just kind of blend this up a little bit, get it to where it's kind of sort of mixed up. We do believe these are soils from around the world. Now, let's take some denatured alcohol. We'll just pour some in. The actual amount is not critical at all. And then I'm just going to stir it up. Right now it feels a little bit crusty, so I'm trying to get it wet and get it into solution. You can see by the paper towel that the actual color there is kind of a brown, well, kind of a reddish brown color. And that tone is very similar to what's in the rest of the house. So now I'll put the lid on, and I hope it doesn't leak because I'm going to shake it up and try to get it all mixed up. I shook it up really good, so while it sits for a minute, I'll tell you about the colors we have. This is cypress green, Ercolano red, and yellow ochre. I have to make sure that I stop frequently, put the lid on and shake this back up, and I may need to add more alcohol to it as we go. But the pigments will settle to the bottom. I want to make sure that they stay up in solution. So we've chosen a foam brush. We're just going to take that and just start laying it on. Nice and smooth. With this pigment, it's really important that you keep it moving. Work one area at a time and blend it out, because if you don't, you're going to have some unevenness. Just like right there, that spot was allowed to dry. Now, getting it wet again should reactivate it, which it did. So we're just going to keep blending and blending and applying. Now it's starting to get a little bit kind of dilute, so let's go ahead and shake that back up, get it back in solution, and keep applying. I just finished applying the stain. That is the first and only coat that I'm going to put on here. But I went ahead and I covered up all the surfaces. I haven't done the underside yet, but I will. And the key here, and I can't overemphasize this, is to make sure that you keep smooth strokes and try to keep it as even as possible. And that way your finished results will look much better. So as you can see, compared to unfinished wood, this is just plain white pine, southern white pine. And now it has a kind of a aged look to it, like it's been sitting in the sun for many, many years. Maybe has gone through some humidity and maybe got dirty, who knows? But that's just kind of the substrate. But we're not done yet. This jar is almost empty, but there's still a good amount of pigment in the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and top it off with a little more alcohol. Like I said earlier, the actual amount's not important because the alcohol is just a carrier and nothing more. It goes in, and then it evaporates. Now the bottom side here is a lot easier because it's all one big surface. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay it on nice and smooth. Oops. Nice and smooth. This one's a little darker than this one, and that's because the pigments are starting to settle, and they settle fast. So I'm going to come back and just shake it up a little bit and then continue on. And it's okay if I go back over a spot that I've gone over before, as long as I keep it smooth. Nice, smooth, long strokes. For those of you who have used shellac, you'll definitely recognize the aroma because it smells exactly the same. And when you're doing this, you know, if you see an area that looks different, maybe a little lighter, you know, don't worry about it, because it's super easy to touch up. What's happening here is that the alcohol is bringing the pigment to the wood and dropping it down into the wood fibers, and then it evaporates quickly. In all my research to find out what the cabinet makers did back in the old days, I'm talking like hundreds of years ago, I always suspected that it had something to do with pigments. And looking at this, I believe I was correct in my assessment. Now, pigments were fairly easy to come by, and so was alcohol. And so far, this is starting to look like the same stuff that our ancestors used. Now, alcohol flashes off pretty quickly. And this side here is done, it's dry, but over here is still wet. You can see more of an orange color. And this here just looks like aged wood. Now, when this dries, it should look fairly even. And if it doesn't, I always have the opportunity to go back over it one more time with a wet brush and even it out. But we're going to take off and let this thing dry. The cover is now ready to have the oil finish applied. So I've chosen this, it's called Dark Half. It's made by the Real Milk Paint Company, and this is actually tung oil with a citrus solvent blended in, so it's ready to go on. Tung oil by itself is too thick to use straight, and you have to reduce it, and that's what the citrus solvent is for. It has the added benefit of smelling like oranges. It's really yummy. Don't drink it though. I'm going to go ahead and put some of this in a jar. The pigments that we applied to this are still just powder, and they sit on the surface like dust. And if you rub it, you're going to get your hands covered in it. And so what we want to do is get that oil down in there and let that oil bind it and bring it down into the wood and bind it so that it doesn't come back off. So let's go ahead and take our brush, just get a little bit of oil on there, and just start brushing it on. Now the thing about dark half is it already has a colorant in it, which is going to darken up the wood. And because we're trying to get that old look, that's exactly what we want. I'm brushing it on very lightly. I'm not scrubbing it. We want to have an opportunity for our pigments to stay on there. Now there are a lot of tung oils out there, and there's also some fake tung oils out there, and other people have covered those on their channels. But this one here by this company is actually real tung oil, so we can be assured of its quality. And this stuff is food safe. You can use it on cutting boards. In fact, I used it on Jeannie's cutting board a couple of days ago, and I'll show you that after a while if I remember. All right, there we have it. So the oil is binding the pigments and putting them down into the wood, and then the oil is soaking in, and it helps to nourish the wood and preserve it. I think we've got a really antique looking wood here. It doesn't look anything at all like that raw pine that we had a few minutes ago. Let's have Jeannie come in here and take a look.
Ooh, oh, that looks beautiful. What do you guys think?
That looks like antique wood right there.
That does.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's not glossy at all. I mean, it's still wet, but when it dries, it'll be completely dead flat.
Now
Yeah.
the pigment won't come off now, right?
Yeah, once it's dry and solid, it should be okay, but it has to set up.
Okay.
It has to, really dry, because oil doesn't evaporate like
Right.
the other stuff did. It actually has to harden up, and that'll happen over time, and it should. Let me just take a swipe here and see. Yeah, I don't see any pigment coming off, so it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, do we dare do the rest of the blanket chest?
Yes, we do.
All right.
I love it.
Okay, let's do this. That was pretty amazing. So let's do the top now. When we turned this thing over, we got orange pigment all over our hands. So it's good to know that the oil is doing what it's supposed to do. The nice thing about tung oil is you can just continue to apply it over time, and additional coats is not going to hurt anything because it just soaks in. And if the wood gets to the point where it can't absorb anymore, it'll just stop absorbing it. And at that point, just wipe off the excess and you are good to go. All right, you guys, we are loving this look here. It looks absolutely antique. Now, remember just a few minutes ago, this is the color that it was. This is absolutely unfinished southern yellow pine compared with it. I mean, look at the difference. It just brought out a very antique quality about this. And as it dries, and it's soaking in, and the oil will harden up, and it's just gonna look great. It'll look like old wood. That's what we're looking for.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Yes, it is. Now, we were a little concerned because the oil is supposed to trap the pigment and lock it in, but as we're handling it, we're getting a little bit on our fingers. So what we're going to do is allow this to dry, and then we'll put more oil on it and allow it to dry again and see what happens. Now, worst case scenario, we may have to coat this with shellac, just enough to lock it in.
I hope not.
We hope not too, because it looks really good in its
Yes.
unshiny kind of state right now. But we'll see what happens. But what we don't want to have happen is to have this stuff coming off on Jeannie's blankets as they sit in the blanket chest.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So if we had 100 years to age the wood, this wouldn't be an issue, but we're trying to get that look now.
Well, we've got some outside chores to do. Spring weather is here, so we're gonna get to those. It's not very interesting, just cleaning up here and there. So thank you for watching 1834 Restoration House.